A heavy downpour pounded against the rusted metal roof of my grandfather's old lakeside cabin as I stood on the splintered porch, gripping the hands of my two young daughters while a single cardboard box rested at my rain-soaked sneakers. My eldest sister, Nora, briefly unlatched the heavy oak door only to peer through the crack with a cold, analytical gaze before firmly sliding the deadbolt back into place without uttering a single word of comfort. My younger brother, Silas, chuckled mockingly from the safety of the dry living room window, while my mother peeked out from behind the floral curtains to mouth a silent lecture about making better life choices. Standing there in the drenching rain, I swallowed the bitter taste of betrayal and whispered a three-word vow to the darkened woods: watch me rise. 18 months prior to that humiliating night on the porch, my life as Evelyn would have been classified by any outside observer as completely adequate, predictable, and comfortably secure. I resided in a suburban split-level home featuring a reasonably modern kitchen and drove a reliable Navy sedan with a dented rear bumper, raising two fiercely independent daughters whose rapid growth made me feel as though time was slipping like sand through my fingers. 10-year-old Maeve was a quiet intellectual who insisted on analyzing the schematics of every household appliance, while 7-year-old Chloe was a whirlwind of untamed energy who spent her afternoons leaping off sofas under the firm conviction that she could command the wind. My life revolved around managing their chaotic schedules, until the day my decade-long marriage to Julian completely fractured into irrecoverable pieces. Julian was a charismatic architect whose smooth, quiet demeanor masked a profound inability to take responsibility for any emotional fallout within our household. He never resorted to shouting or overt displays of anger, yet he possessed an unsettling talent for subtly shifting the blame of every domestic failure onto my shoulders until I genuinely doubted my own reality. I balanced a demanding position as a remote logistics coordinator with the endless cycle of packing school lunches, managing pediatric checkups, and comforting the girls through midnight thunderstorms. Meanwhile, Julian poured his entire soul into his regional firm, frequently traveling for high-profile client consultations that kept him away from our family for days on end. It was during one of these prolonged business trips that an unencrypted notification flashed across his abandoned tablet, exposing a string of explicit messages that instantly shattered 10 years of shared history in less than a minute. The subsequent weeks descended into a blur of stilted conversations and failed marriage counseling sessions that only highlighted the vast, unbridgeable chasm growing between us. Julian offered a series of hollow, rehearsed apologies that felt entirely performative, leaving me completely cold and certain that our marriage had reached its natural expiration date. By the time the early summer heat rolled in, I had officially retained legal counsel and filed for a dissolution of our marriage, completely unaware of the storm brewing within my own biological family. I had erroneously believed that my parents, Vivian and Arthur, who prided themselves on their traditional values and unwavering family loyalty, would provide a safe harbor during my time of crisis. Instead, when I phoned my mother to explain the impending divorce and request temporary lodging in their spacious country estate, an icy silence filled the line before she could formulate a response. Despite the fact that my parents owned an expansive 5-bedroom estate with an entire finished attic that had served as our communal holiday retreat for years, my mother insisted they lacked the physical space to accommodate 3 additional bodies. She rigidly advised me to swallow my pride and endure Julian's indiscretions for the sake of financial stability, implying that a wife's primary duty was to maintain the outward appearance of a successful union at all costs. Refusing to accept her dismissal over the phone, I packed our essential belongings into a single box the next morning and drove directly to the estate, hoping a face-to-face plea would soften their hardened hearts. My father answered the door with a grim, rehearsed expression that immediately signaled he had already chosen his allegiance in this family dispute. Arthur looked directly past my exhausted face to gaze coldly at his young granddaughters, informing me in a flat, unyielding tone that welcoming a broken family into their home would disrupt their peaceful retirement routine. When I pleaded that the ongoing legal battle left me temporarily displaced and desperate for shelter, he bluntly suggested that I return to Julian and learn to tolerate his flaws for the long-term benefit of the children. Maeve gripped my hand with a fierce maturity that broke my heart, while Chloe buried her face in my wet coat as the heavy front door began to swing shut against us. Before the latch clicked, Silas leaned over my father's shoulder with a smug grin, reminding me that his elaborate model train display currently occupied the entire spare wing of the house anyway. Just as the door was about to fully close, Nora stepped onto the threshold with her arms tightly crossed, delivering a patronizing lecture about how my emotional impulsivity was actively damaging my daughter's psychological stability. She smugly asserted that Julian's substantial income should outweigh my personal grievances, completely ignoring the years of emotional neglect and infidelity I had quietly endured to keep the peace. I refused to let them witness a single tear fall down my face, so I simply turned around, carrying the heavy cardboard box back to our sedan while my daughters buckled themselves into the back seat in stunned silence. We spent our first night of freedom in a budget motel located near the highway bypass, where the neon sign flickered through the thin curtains and the smell of stale cleaning products hung heavily in the damp air. Maeve immediately stepped into the role of helper by organizing our limited clothing options, while Chloe boldly claimed the center of the sagging mattress, declaring that our temporary room resembled a secret castle hidden away from the rest of the world. Their innocent resilience sparked a genuine, breathless laugh from deep within my chest, grounding me in the realization that everything I truly needed was safely contained within those four walls. As the girls drifted into a deep sleep, I mapped out our immediate future on a motel notepad, cataloging my modest savings, my steady job performance, and the fierce determination ignited by my family's rejection. I resolved to stop mourning the safety net that had failed me, focusing all my cognitive energy instead on building a completely unassailable life from the ground up. The following weeks demanded a level of grit I didn't know I possessed, characterized by modest dinners of instant noodles and long hours spent working under the flickering lights of the motel desk. My immediate supervisor at the logistics firm, a fiercely independent woman named Elena, eventually noticed my exhaustive work hours and offered a significant promotion to regional director before I could even assemble a formal request. With a stable salary secured, I successfully leased a modest two-bedroom apartment situated in a quiet, working-class neighborhood that boasted an excellent local school district. The kitchen counters were noticeably outdated and the living room radiator emitted a rhythmic clanking noise every morning, but the bright indigo curtains Chloe selected injected a vibrant sense of ownership into our new sanctuary. The legal proceedings spanned nearly 9 grueling months, during which Julian's aggressive legal team attempted to portray me as an unstable parent incapable of managing a demanding career alongside childcare. However, my attorney presented a mountain of meticulously organized school reports, medical records, and extracurricular enrollment forms that definitively established my role as the primary caregiver. The family court judge ruled heavily in our favor, granting me primary physical custody along with substantial retroactive child support that Julian's legal team could not manipulate. Word of the definitive court ruling spread rapidly through our small community, prompting a surprising and completely unprompted phone call from my mother. Vivian adopted a cheerful, celebratory tone as though she had been my most ardent supporter throughout the entire grueling legal ordeal, completely rewriting the history of that rainy night on the porch. When I calmly reminded her that she had locked her doors to her own granddaughters during their moment of greatest vulnerability, she immediately became defensive and accused me of holding onto unnecessary grudges. I quietly listened to her frantic justifications without offering any emotional validation, eventually cutting the conversation short by stating that my current focus belonged entirely to my daughters. Months later, Nora sent a lengthy, overly sentimental email filled with pseudo-intellectual apologies, claiming she had merely been playing devil's advocate during our last face-to-face encounter. I read her wall of text with complete emotional detachment, recognizing that her sudden desire to reconcile stemmed from a realization that I no longer required her validation or assistance. I replied with a brief, polite note explaining that I needed an indefinite amount of time before re-establishing any form of communication, a boundary she has desperately tried to cross with weekly text messages ever since. Silas remained completely silent in his gaming wing, which provided the clearest indication of his superficial character and saved me the trouble of establishing boundaries with him. On Christmas morning, a brief card arrived from my father containing a generic holiday greeting, which I placed on the refrigerator solely because my daughters deserved to maintain a connection with their grandfather's handwriting. Exactly 1 year after the final divorce decree was stamped, the corporate executives rewarded my department's unprecedented quarterly growth with an unexpected merit bonus and a permanent salary increase. Standing in my office with the official paperwork in hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride knowing this financial security was entirely self-earned, free from the strings of Julian's wealth or my parents' conditional charity. We quickly upgraded to a spacious 3-bedroom townhouse where Maeve could study in absolute silence and Chloe could cover her bedroom walls with vibrant, chaotic finger paintings of mythical creatures. One evening while preparing dinner in our beautifully lit kitchen, Maeve leaned against the counter and quietly remarked that our family finally felt completely safe and unbroken. Her profound observation brought an immediate rush of warmth to my chest, validating every single sacrifice made in the dark corners of that highway motel room over the past 18 months. True justice did not arrive in the form of a dramatic cinematic confrontation or a satisfying moment where my family begged for my forgiveness on bended knee. Instead, it manifested in the quiet stability of a lease signed exclusively in my name, a thriving bank account, and the joyful laughter of 2 healthy children sleeping peacefully in their own rooms. Julian eventually moved into a cramped apartment on the industrial side of town after his new relationship collapsed, maintaining a strictly civil, text-only communication channel with me regarding weekend visitation schedules. I completely abandoned the exhausting expectation of receiving a formal apology from my parents or siblings, realizing that waiting for their remorse was merely a subtle way of remaining trapped in their toxic orbit. True liberation meant accepting that some people are fundamentally incapable of acknowledging the pain they inflict, and I refused to waste another ounce of energy on a family that required me to beg for basic human empathy. Last weekend, Maeve's Middle School hosted an academic exhibition where students displayed independent research projects focusing on modern psychological concepts. I proudly walked through the crowded gymnasium, holding a cardboard tray of lukewarm coffee as I searched for my daughter's designated presentation station among the rows of trifold boards. Maeve's project was titled The Architecture of Human Resilience, featuring a sophisticated analysis of how individuals rebuild their lives after experiencing profound systemic trauma or personal betrayal. At the very bottom of her display board, she had penned an original conclusion stating that truly resilient individuals do not waste time praying for a rescue party, they simply become their own saviors. When I asked her about the inspiration behind that powerful concluding thought, she looked up at me with absolute clarity and replied that she had simply documented what she witnessed every single day in our home. At just 11 years old, my daughter possessed a profound understanding of self-reliance that had taken me over 3 decades of painful trial and error to fully comprehend. I do not share this deeply personal journey to elicit pity or collect empty expressions of sympathy from strangers on the internet, because my life today is beautifully complete and filled with genuine abundance. I share this narrative specifically for the women who are currently standing on a cold porch in the pouring rain, holding the hands of terrified children while watching a door slam firmly in their faces. The closing of that door is not the tragic conclusion of your personal narrative, it is the catalyst for a spectacular rebirth you cannot yet fathom. The individuals who locked me out 18 months ago are still idling in the exact same stagnant routines, while I have constructed an entirely new empire from a cardboard box and a 3-word whisper. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.